Thanks for joining us back here again. In this session, we're going to talk first some of the theory, a little bit of background about data analysis with the support of the webQDA software, and then we're going to spend most of our time actually on the platform seeing how to use it. And I want to leave you with some ideas about practical ways that you could apply webQDA, even though perhaps you're still stuck at home the way I am here, depending on the country you're in. Doesn't matter. We can still do qualitative research even from our houses. And I'm going to show you some ideas. But let's start with a little bit of the background. First, when we talk about the whole world of academic research, there's two main sides. We have the quantitative analysis and qualitative. Here, we're mainly talking about qualitative. So to give us an idea of where does this fit in, often research is based on hard data, numbers, or even in the social sciences, surveys, questionnaires, things that we can quantify in some way. We can give them a number or a category. This is very useful. I'm not saying it's bad, but there are some topics that are so new that we don't even know what categories we should include. We need to use open-ended questions because if we try to limit to just a set of categories or just a certain set of numbers, we could miss some important information. That's where tools like webQDA fit in. So what forms does qualitative data take out in the wild? Well, in the medical setting, we can look at clinical reports. We can have personal documents like letters, even historical studies in the humanities. We can have field notes from a research project, for example. And we don't even need words. We could use photographs. Obviously, we'll need to categorize some part of the photograph in some way in order to organize it, but we don't even need words. We can also use videos. Of course, we could transcribe all of the audio in the video and have the text and we could analyze it, but we can also look for themes or topics in videos without having to write out everything that was said. We can use subjects discourse. Interviews are perhaps one of the most common options. Focus groups are another good option. And we can look at official documents, publications from government entities, or even from newspapers or other organizations, and sift through all of those documents looking for, well, what should we look for? When we talk about data analysis in qualitative research, we have to work with all of this data in some way, right? We need to organize it. That often means dividing the data into manageable units. We separate it based on certain characteristics, and then we try to synthesize, find what all of the data in a certain category has in common. That often means looking for patterns. At a basic level, this could be what are some of the most commonly used words? But it doesn't have to be just at that level. We can talk about not only words, but ideas. Because, well, people don't always use the same words to talk about the same topic. We could have synonyms or describing a case, some circumstances that fit a certain category. That's part of our job as qualitative researchers to help find these patterns and to discover some of the important aspects of the data. Now, this word of discovery is a key word here because we're not trying to just force the categories that we assume we will find, but rather we're looking through the data, sifting through all of it, looking for or discovering what the data has to tell us, what we can learn from this data, what are some commonly repeated topics or ideas, and then we need to find how can we transmit this data, how can we share what we found with others. Now, this is not without its challenges. One of the problems, if we could say it that way, right, is that there are so many research settings. Of course, in a university setting is one of the main options, but we're not limited there. More and more businesses are using qualitative research to analyze, especially on social media. What are our customers saying about us? What do the reviews of our company say about us? That's one common qualitative research question, even in the business world. There's also so many formats and data types. When we talk about quantitative data, we usually have some categories, maybe a Likert scale. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the most, yeah, how much do you think about this? Yeah, that's great. But here in qualitative data, we allow our participants to have a more free range to give us their answers. But that means it's a little harder to condense all of this information in an organized way. Harder, but not impossible. And that's where tools like webQDA come in. We can also deal with large amounts of data, especially with the boom of the internet and social media. We can now have access to more qualitative data than ever before. All of the posts on your Facebook wall, all of the tweets, all of the Instagram posts, all of the YouTube videos, these can be qualitative data if we take the time to organize them and analyze them. We can also use qualitative methods mixed together with quantitative methods. We can use surveys, questionnaires, or numerical data like bank account statements of public corporations, for example. We can use this information together. We don't have to go just one side or the other of this big research world, right? We can mix quantitative and qualitative together. There's a certain complexity involved in all of this, especially if we're trying to do triangulation analysis. But it is possible. And working in multidisciplinary and even international groups brings its own challenges, but is also much more rewarding. And tools like webQDA can help us interact with other researchers in our team in any part of the world. That's one of the great benefits that it offers us. Now, there is, especially in the academic community, an increased demand for transparency and the validation of our process and results. What I mean is, if we publish a quantitative study, we're going to apply 2 different questionnaires or scales and then correlate the results that we find. There are some fairly established practices for the statistics involved in a correlation analysis. So if we follow those regularly used practices, usually people aren't going to give us a second thought to our methodology. But here in qualitative analysis, since there's always a certain amount of subjectivity involved, we need to be very careful in how we detail our process. Because the public, our shareholders, the people who read our articles, everybody wants to know that we really tried to make sure that our own biases, our own perspectives didn't overly influence what we found in the data. And we need to integrate with information communication technology in all phases of our study. So here's an idea of kind of overly dramatic, right? What's it like trying to do qualitative data analysis without any software at all? Is it possible? Well, of course it's possible, but it ends up a little something like this. What would happen if you took a typewriter into a university class and started taking notes with it? You could do it, but it's not the most efficient way. So what if we try using some other basic software that we have on our computer already? What if I use a table in Microsoft Word, or I use Excel, or their Google Docs versions to organize some data in columns? Could I do it? Well, of course, it's possible. I could even print them out or write out the different comments that I want to organize on little slips of paper and organize them on a corkboard. It's possible, but it's time consuming. And the added problem is that these tools don't have any specific abilities to help us organize our data. In other words, it's like we're trying to force these tools to do something that they weren't really designed to do. It's possible, it can be done, but it's not the most efficient way. And we'll be missing out on some useful tools that more specialized software could offer us. Because there are some challenges with this specific software, qualitative data analysis software, we'll call it. We need to be able to work with different types of formats and data types, with pictures, with video, with text, with Facebook posts. We need to be able to work with all of this kind of data in one platform. We need to be able to deal with large amounts of data if that's the type of study that we're doing. We need a great deal of flexibility in how exactly we do the most common tasks like marking a specific sentence or part of a source is a certain category. We call this tagging. And we need to be able to collaborate in large groups. Of course, we could do a qualitative project all by ourselves, but usually there's so much analysis to be done that we need other team members. So we need some software or a platform that can help us collaborate. And it needs to be simple. With so many people involved, we can't afford to give each person a master's degree in the use of this software just to be able to help us, right? We need something that you can just pick up and use with a fairly easy learning curve. And the more compatible and portable the process, the better. So here's a brief overview. Where does webQDA fit into the history of qualitative data analysis software? Well, we could say that the first software project to try to do qualitative analysis was back in 1966 at MIT. Although this arguably wasn't exactly designed for qualitative analysis, it was for text analysis. In the 80s, we started seeing some software like Ethnograph and the Nudeist project trying to organize qualitative data. And this has led to nowadays we have the NVivo option. In the early 90s, we saw the prototype of Atlas TI, which is another main software platform for qualitative analysis. As we came into the 2000s, the rush was to be able to add not just the transcription of some interviews like text files, but to be able to work directly with video, with images, with audio. And some newcomers, and this time like Hyper Research, Transcriber, Transana, all came in trying to fill this void. By 2004, the Nudist project had basically moved into NVivo and gave some additional new features, and Atlas TI also came in there trying to compete. By 2009, we saw the idea of moving this whole software process to an online platform. That way, we don't need to install software on our computer, but rather we can access all of our research project from any web-connected device. That's where Deduce and webQDA come in the US and Portugal, respectively, right? This webQDA is a Portuguese project, but it's now available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. That's why we're here in this English language webinar. From 2013 and on, there's been a rush to also have mobile interfaces available and more to be able to incorporate more data from social networks and multimedia. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, that's where qualitative data analysis is largely heading. Not that the old ways like an interview or a focus group are bad, just that they're increasingly shifting to online ways, especially now. Now, over 25 years ago, Miles and Huberman wrote that the researcher who does not use software beyond a word processor will be hampered in comparison to those who do. And I think that this is more true now than it was back then. Back over 25 years ago, these specialized software were just really starting to take shape. And now we have several options to choose from and an increasing focus on online platforms to do this. And I think that they're completely right. We could try to use Microsoft Word or its OpenOffice or Google Docs alternatives to try to organize our data in tables. But we would be at a serious disadvantage. We would be hampered, as they said, in comparison to those who use more specialized options. But then how do we choose one? If there's so many different qualitative data analysis software options, how can we choose one? Well, to answer a question about qualitative analysis, they did a qualitative research study. They posted in ResearchGate this question: can you recommend a software for analyzing qualitative data, interview transcripts? And they looked at the factors that people commented as the most important things for them. What do you look for? There's a lot of literature about the idea, and often it's biased towards the company that sponsored it, right? But here's what some online people reported through ResearchGate would be some of the most valued features of a qualitative data analysis software and some of their biggest points of frustration, their dissatisfaction factors. Top of the list is ease of use. It's got to be easy to use, and it needs adequate functionalities. Then, of course, it should contribute towards the research that we want to do, right? And we need a good price to quality ratio, can't be too expensive, and we need ease of learning. So ease of use and ease of learning kind of go together on this one, right? We need a not so steep learning curve. We need to be able to just pick it up and use it. And webQDA has been built with that in mind, to be very intuitive. Now, the frustrating points are often inadequate functionalities, bad price to quality ratio, that it's hard to learn, that it's difficult to use, and that it's not compatible with the devices that we want to use. So taking that in mind, we can say that we're looking for ways to analyze qualitative data. We need to be able to search through the content. We need to be able to code it or tag it. We need to be able to query or ask questions of our data. We need to be able to write and annotate, and we need to be able to generate maps or networking tools so we can visualize what we found. Here are some of the qualitative data software packages that are out there right now, and a little bit about webQDA's history. Back in 2010, at a university in Portugal, they started this project, the three authors here mentioned, to develop a platform for qualitative data analysis. By 2015, they shifted into micro I/O, this partnership, and over the last 5 years, webQDA has been growing, developing their web platform, and enabling translations in English and in Spanish. Now, webQDA is designed to help researchers like you and me to deal with non-numerical, unstructured data in qualitative analysis. So we can edit, view, link documents, we can create categories, we can encode or add tags to our data, we can manage it, filter it, query it, question it, so that we can answer our research questions. That's what webQDA is all about. And to be able to do this in an intuitive way in a web-based platform that we can access from basically any web-based device. Two of the main contexts where we can find a use for webQDA are in academic contexts. Obviously, researchers as well as students, especially those working on their thesis, need some tools to help them do qualitative data analysis. And this can be a great way to develop journal publications. But also a business context is increasingly focused on qualitative data analysis to see what customers are saying about our product or what they think about our latest ad campaign, or even just what they commented in our Facebook page. Qualitative data analysis has its place in the business world too. But there's something we should keep in mind here. webQDA is to qualitative research, and SPSS is to quantitative research, as the word processor, like Microsoft Word, is for writing. The human factor is always critical. Or said in another way, my text editor doesn't write alone. I can't just open Microsoft Word, ask it to write my thesis, and come back an hour later and print it out. That's not how it works. We, in this case, as the researchers, are fundamental in the way we carry out our research study. It's not that the tool is going to do our job for us. That's not the point. But there are some things that computers are better at than we are, like organizing data. And that's where webQDA comes in. It gives us the tools to organize our data so that we can better analyze it. Now, before we even start to use webQDA, there's a few things we should take in mind. We need some solid, sound research questions. We can't just start with the first question that comes to mind. We really need to focus in our research question. We need feasible objectives, especially when we talk about analysis from social media. It's possible to include so much data that we could never sift through all of it. If we try to look at all the Facebook posts from 2020, no, there's no way we could sift through it all, right? We need to be feasible, we need to be focused, and we need a comprehensive theoretical framework. How are we going to choose how to organize our data? There are several leading qualitative research frameworks. We should look through them and choose one to apply in our study. We need to validate the data collection instruments. Sometimes it's as simple as a question that we post on Facebook. I'm going to show you an example of that. But we should really think about the question or the instruments that we're going to use before we start using them. We need to carefully and systematically transcribe our interviews or focus groups, if that's the route we're going for. We need to really structure the data. Now, I wanted to share, to encourage you a little bit, is it possible to publish articles using webQDA? Well, it sure is. Here are 3 of several examples just within the last year or so. To give an idea of what sort of context could we apply this in, well, we have a focus group and an open item questionnaire used in an academic setting. Those results were published last year. We have a pre-test and post-test interviews as kind of questioning people about their health literacy as part of a nursing study. At the beginning, we ask people some health literacy related questions, kind of get a feel for what they know. Then they go through a whole training program, and at the end, we ask them questions again and see what they learned. That's an option that was published this year. And we can even use semi-structured interviews about local ecological knowledge. This was applied to fishing and what fishermen and local fish and game personnel know about a certain kind of fish. That's also possible. So even outside of what we might typically think of as academic contexts, we can find ways to publish what we research using webQDA. Now, for the frequently asked questions section, we might have to come back to this in another session because there's a lot of questions and we want to get to your questions too. But let's hit some highlights here. What can we research using webQDA? Well, we're looking at qualitative analysis. That often means we're at the early stages of beginning to understand a topic. We're in an exploratory or discovery phase. If it's a topic that's already well studied for years, we probably don't need another qualitative study of it. We're looking at new things that we're just starting to figure out. And how does webQDA differ from traditional research tools? Well, it gives us extra, what can we say, extra functionality. It's built around organizing qualitative data. So rather than trying to get Excel or something like that to sort of work, if we adjust it just the right way, we're using a tool that's built from the ground up for qualitative data analysis. Now, some things that we should keep in mind here, we don't want to paint the picture that it's just so easy. Yeah, I'm going to sit down one afternoon and write a qualitative study. Maybe not. The problem here is that it is time consuming to code or to label all of our data. But it's a whole lot slower if we don't use any software at all. And this process generally can't be delegated. We, as the researchers, need to go through, sift through all of our data and look for these patterns to emerge. So we also should keep in mind that we're probably not going to result in a formula or a predictive model the way we might in some quantitative studies. We aren't at that stage yet. We can just present some initial findings about a new topic. So the 3 main areas that we're going to find within the webQDA interface that we're going to look at here in just a moment are coding, where we label or tag the data that we have, the sources, where we can have external sources like a YouTube video, or an internal source like the transcription of an interview, and the questioning, where we use some tools to analyze the data that we have and try to find answers to our questions. And here it is presented in a different way. Now, what are the tech specs? We need a browser and a device that's capable of HTML5, cookies, and JavaScript, with a resolution of at least 1280 by 720. That includes pretty much all modern laptops and desktop computers, as well as many mobile devices and tablets. I can tell you from personal experience that I've been able to get in on my Android cell phone using Google Chrome for Android. The built-in browser has some problems with the JavaScript, but using Chrome for Android, I've been able to get in, see my webQDA project without any major problems. And what about the sources? Well, we can upload text documents up to 500,000 characters per file. And what if we want to analyze more text than that? No problem. We just split it up over separate text files. And we can upload images. They can be JPEGs or PNGs, up to 5 megabytes per file. We can have some audio sources, like we can record an interview using our cell phone even, in MP3 or WAV format, up to 10 megabytes per file. And we can even have video sources. And I want to show you a cool way this could work, especially with WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, up to 20 megabytes per file. But what if we need something bigger than that? What if we want an hour-long video? Well, that's not going to fit in 20 megabytes. No problem. We can upload them to YouTube and include the link as an external source. Or we can upload big files to Dropbox and include those in through a link. So there's always a workaround if we need bigger files than the interface itself provides for. Thanks for your attention there. I'm going to leave you some contact information, but let's go now into the software. Are you ready? We're going to take a look inside, and I'm going to start over here. This is a sample project that I have going. I'm going to share my screen again so you can follow me here. There we go. So here we are inside webQDA. This is what the interface looks like. I've opened up a sample project that I've been working on, and we're basing on this question, looking for something relevant for today, right? The focus question of this research sample project is about what has been the hardest part about the social isolation quarantine measures due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I've included some data here. I'm making stuff up, so don't go trying to publish these findings, right? This is just for an example. But I want to start here looking at the sources. Let's just go down the list of menu options in order. If we start with internal sources, what are some of the kinds of things that we can upload and use as source data? Well, one option is a video. So here's what I did. I recorded a video using WhatsApp, and then I downloaded it with WhatsApp Web and uploaded it here. So let's imagine this case. I write to some contacts on WhatsApp, and I ask them to answer an open-ended question in a 2-minute video. So here, I'm using an example. I say, what are the 3 hardest things for you about the quarantine social isolation measures due to the COVID-19 pandemic? And I've got my video. So here, I'm answering those questions, right? So here's the catch though. How can I label this in some way? Well, not a problem. All I have to do is split it into little parts, and those parts can be labeled. Now, I could type out the whole transcription of everything that's said here, but it's not really necessary. I can just take little parts of it, the relevant pieces. Or what if I have an interview and I've already transcribed it? I already have it like in a Word document. Well, here I just uploaded this Word document, and here it is inside the text editor right here within the webQDA platform. And here we have the basics of an interview. So all I have to do is find some of the pieces here and tag them. Now, I've created some sample tags or codes over here on the right. What are some of the common answers that come up? Things like COVID-19 has disrupted family gatherings. I can't just meet up with my family like I used to. It's an inconvenience with all the safety protocols. Leave the house and I have to put on a mask, and when I come back in, I have to wash all my clothes. Just a pain. Or the uncertainty about the future. A lot of things are up in the air. A lot of plans had to be canceled. And there's a few others here, right? These are just examples. Now, how do I select some of the text here and tag it with one of these codes? Well, it's easy. All I have to do is highlight it and tag it. Like over here. If we, right here, gotta make sure the coding is displayed. So the biggest one for this person was about my job. They used to work at a shop in a tourist town, and the shop got closed because there aren't any tourists. So that's rough. And it's hard to find a job right now. Okay, so we're going to select that. We're going to hit the, okay, like the inconvenience of working tag. All right. And now it's all highlighted. Now notice here that it shows up in a certain color with my name on it. Why? Because several people could all be collaborating on the same document. If you've ever used Google Docs and their collaborative features, it's much the same. And up here even we can see how many people are online right now connected. Obviously, since this is an example, it's just me, right? But I can invite other people to come join me, and we'll look into that in just a little bit. But each person will have their own color and their own little tag, so we can see who did what. And how can we take the demographics of the person here in this interview? Those are called descriptors. Now I have some sample ones here, like the person's gender, their age range, and their country of residence. And since this document is all about one person, it's easier, rather than tagging just little pieces of it, I can tag the whole document. So here's something that's a little bit tricky. This is what was a little hard for me to get at first. So I want you to follow me carefully here. Two different examples. We have just one person talking in an interview, and in another example, we have the responses of several people. But how do we do it? Here, I'm using a Google form. You could use whatever online form platform you like, but here I went through the responses, and now Google Docs or Google Forms gives me an Excel file where I've got all of the answers. But if I ask in my Google form for some basic socio-demographic information, like the person's gender, their age range, their country of residence, or whatever other things you would like to include, we can import an Excel file, and then it automatically shows up tagged. Each paragraph is tagged with the socio-demographic characteristics of the person who filled it out. Like we can see that this one here was tagged by a female between 36 and 40 years old from the Philippines. Or up here, we have a male from 18 to 25 from Australia, based on what they responded in their Google form answers. This is a big time saver. Here we just have, as an example, right? Maybe 5 or 6 people filled out our form. But what if we had 100 respondents? It would be a big time sink to go through and tag each and every one with all of these descriptors. It's a whole lot easier if we just do it automatically. So that's one big plus. That's one thing that I really enjoy about the use of webQDA. We can set up some descriptors in our Google form or some other platform like that and just import them all. But what would it look like if we imported something from the internet? Over here in this other tab, I've got my own Facebook. What I was thinking is, well, I'm just going to ask my friends. So I asked about 12 hours ago. I put up this question: what have been the 3 hardest things about the social isolation quarantine measures during the COVID-19 pandemic? And well, I've got about 5 of my friends and contacts have replied. So what do? I'm just going to select, just going to drag through all this text, copy it, make sure that all of the text is displayed. Yep, looks like. And I'm just going to go back over here to webQDA, go into source, and I don't have a file, I don't have a Word document, I just have some text. So I go to new text and paste it. There they all are. Those are the comments. Now I can give this a label like Facebook question. All right, and I save it. Now here's the catch. Since I got this all from Facebook, I can tag some of the descriptive information about these people, but it's not automatic. So what do I have to do? There are 2 main ways that we tag the data. One way is with the codes. Here we're talking about the topic. Like here in this topic, not being able to spend time with my elderly mother. Well, that's definitely a disruption of family gatherings tag. But what about the socio-demographic information of this person? That is in the menu of descriptors. So all I need to do is select this person, and I could go back over to Facebook. I could look at this person's profile and try to guess as best as I can. Like, well, okay, apparently this is a female on the age range. I'm honestly not super sure, but let's go with 36 to 40. And I know that this person is from the US. All right, that's all it takes. Now this information is linked together. What does that mean? What are we shooting for? What's the goal with all of this tagging? It's a bit of a tedious process if we're doing it by hand here. So why do we do it? What we're looking for is a way to present our data of all of the people who responded to our questions. How many of which kinds of people responded in certain ways? That's what we're going to look at when we get down into the questioning stage. Now, now that we've looked at these 2 different types, main types of internal sources, we can have just one person like an interview. And that interview could be written out, transcribed. It could be just a video from a WhatsApp conversation or a Facebook Messenger. Whatever it is with just one person, it's easier to tag the source itself. All of the content of this source is from one type of person. That's over here in the classification. Now I've set up the classification type of interview. And an interview gives me 3 attributes. And I could define more or less depending on how I want to. But this one, let's say this video is from a male. Let's say he's 32 years old. And the date of the interview is, well, today's date. All right. If I save that then, that tags everything in this video with these characteristics. Same thing, I already did that here for this interview that we transcribed. We already tagged it as a female who's 27 years old and that the interview was back on November 29. That's the easiest when it's all within one document or one video, one audio, whatever the source is, it's all about one person. And we set those up here inside the classifications under sources. So here's where I set up interview, gender, age, date of interview. But what if I want to add something else? What if I want to add the country that the person's from? No problem. All I add in is country and say that this is a text type. So I can type in whatever they want. I could create options, and that would give me like a drop-down list, or I can just leave it open. So I can write in text. So now if I go back here, obviously the country hasn't been put in yet. So here I can go back and see which options do I want to include in this drop-down menu. What that means is we can update as we go. If we fill in some of the socio-demographic information at the beginning, but then along the way we think, but there's something else I should have included, no problem. We're always free to add in more attributes to the source. But what about a document where there's several people replying? We've seen that here with answers to a Facebook questions or answers to a Google form. There, we're talking about descriptors. And the descriptors we need to tag at the level inside the document, right? Just one paragraph or one section is by this person. Here, same thing. We can create the options that we want. Here I created gender, age range, and country of residence. But if we want to add another one, no problem. We just add in its title, like education level could be an option. We can give it a little description if you want. Degree achieved, let's say. That's just a little note for us. And if we select this option, then it just gives us the ability to add within that the different categories. Like we could add if they only completed high school, if they completed an undergraduate degree, a graduate degree, a master's, a doctorate. We can list those as options. And then when we go back to our sources, then we'll be able to add those tags. That process is a little time consuming if we do it by hand, but we can import, using this option here, an automatic import of an Excel file where the columns are the different descriptors that we want to use. And I'd say it's a lot easier that way. Personally, I like to just prepare an Excel file with all the information, the columns for each descriptive point that I want to add. And that way I can just import it automatically and I don't need to select each section one by one. That is a big time saver that webQDA gives us. Now then, now that we have all of this wonderful information, what do we do with it? One other thing that I wanted to add. We mentioned outside sources, right? We could use a Dropbox link or we can use a YouTube video. Here, I have included as an example, a YouTube video from the webQDA page. Obviously, it's not about COVID-19, right? But let's just say it were. We've tagged one little section here. Let's just say, as a sample, this part is about uncertainty about the future, and that's the way I've tagged it using the codes over here. And this little section over here, let's say that it's about missing spending time with family, and that's the way I tagged it. So I didn't have to write out the whole transcription of this YouTube video. I just found the relevant parts. I set a start and end time for each little section, and I wrote a brief description. And the text in that brief description is what I can tag with one of my codes. That means we could add a lot of YouTube videos if that's the type of study we would like to do, because we don't need to worry about transcribing everything in the whole video. So we can include long videos even if we want to. There's no limit. It's just what YouTube allows, right? All we need to do is include a link. We could have an image, we could have video, we could have an audio. Here we're talking about YouTube, so just be, we give it a name, we can give it a description, and we paste in the YouTube link right there. It's as easy as that. With that, it's imported into the viewer and the tool that we have here in webQDA for tagging our video content. Works the same way for audio, it's just obviously there's no video with it. But we see the audio track and we just set start and end points for the different little pieces that we want to tag. So that's mainly it. There are some other source types, but those are the main ones. Now then, into the codes. I've created along the way a series of potential codes. And personally, I find it easier to add new codes while I'm working on the sources. We have the option to just define some codes here right from the beginning. But I personally find it easier inside a source to then add these tags. Here in this sample document that's like a Google form, I left the last one untagged so that we could do it here together as an example. So here the person says, I'm worried about my job. All right, that we used to work in a hotel, few guests, so I had to leave. It was on furlough. All right, so that's one thing. So we can tag all of that. But maybe we should give this a new tag. This isn't just an inconvenience of working from home. This is worried that they don't have a job or that they're on furlough. So all we need to do from in here is add a new code. Job instability, I'm going to put it. And down here, I can give it a little description if I want to. But it's not mandatory. It's just an internal thing for me. And now I've got a new code added. I don't need to go over here to the free codes area, add it with a little button, and come back in here into my document. This is a big time-saving step. Right while I'm in the middle of things, while I'm working on tagging my document, I can just add a new code and use it right away. That's, to me, a big plus. That some other software and platforms make it a little more tedious to add new codes. Because of course we can start with a list of codes, the categories that we think we'll find, but it's really over time we go finding more and more. So now that we have data that's all tagged nicely, what do we do with it? Well, we have a few options here under questioning. One option is just the most frequent words. We can choose the top how many. Here as an example, I've chosen the top 10. Okay, and of course, many of these words are just connectors or kind of fluff words. So like that we can remove, right? But some of them are indeed a little more relevant, like people or everything. So we can sift through these results and we can add more or less if we'd like to. An interesting little plus here is that we can then create a word cloud out of these most common words. I like that little feature. It makes it great for preparing a presentation of our results. We can search for specific words or text, but one of the things that I like the most here is in the matrices. Here I've created one as an example. If we want to cross gender with the category or the code that they talk about. And then we can start to draw some preliminary conclusions. Like, for example, obviously, don't go taking this too seriously. This is sample data that I've just made up. But here, we're assuming that the disruption of family gatherings seems to be a greater concern for the ladies than for the men. And the concern about news and social media coverage is more of a concern for men than for women. This sort of data is what we can get out of one of these matrices. And we can choose basically any of the data we've used, any of these little tags we've added. We can choose pretty much any of them to form the rows or the columns of our matrix. We can start a new one. What about country? If we want to find country and or country versus, we could say, or X. This is internal. It's the naming scheme you want to use. Country versus code. All right, so in the lines or the rows, we're just going to include all of the descriptors for country of residence. And in the columns, that's where we're going to put in all of our free codes, or these categories that we've created. And notice, since we added a new one, job instability, it appears there now. It automatically updates here in our matrix. So here, if we look at country versus code, we've got the countries down the side: the US, Australia, South Africa, the United Kingdom, the Philippines. These are just examples. We could obviously add more. And then we can see how many people from that country mention something related to one of these codes. And we can see maybe certain points are more of a concern in certain countries than in others. Obviously, we need to take this with a grain of salt, right? We need to analyze it a little more carefully, because what if we have 10 people who responded from Australia, but we only have one person who responded from the Philippines? Then, of course, we're only going to see low numbers here, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that's less important for people from the Philippines. We need to take in mind the input that we have, right? But these sorts of tables, these matrices, are very useful for finding some trends or patterns in our data and then presenting that as part of our findings. It could be in a journal article. It could be in a PowerPoint presentation that we have to give some higher ups in our company. Wherever we need to present data, these matrices are a more quantitative way of expressing what we have found through our qualitative analysis. These categories that we create and these socio-demographic variables that we use, we can cross-reference them to see some patterns and trends. To me, this is one of the biggest pluses that webQDA offers us, is these matrices. And that's why we need to add as much information as possible to our sources, so that we can then generate these reports better based on that data. Now, one extra thing that we wanted to mention, we talked about collaborative use. Here, I've added an extra user. What I did was I created an extra account using a different email address that I have. So of course, I need to have, as the main person in charge of this project, I need to have a license, right? But let's imagine a case like a thesis advisor. The student maybe has a license, but the advisor doesn't. Or in a work setting, the employee has a license, but their supervisor doesn't. Can we share all of this interface and its reports with our supervisor, with our thesis advisor, without them having to get their own license? Yes, we can. This is one of the newer features that they've added in, and I highlighted how it works here in this perceptions Google form document, right? See these underlines? Those mark a comment. Now, I had to do this from a different computer, right? Using a different account, but it's tagged with my other name, this m.t.white. We can say that that's like the thesis advisor or the supervisor in work. So they have the option to select text and leave a comment. So it shows up with this underline, and as we mouse over it, it shows up the comment. So here, their suggestion, for example, right, is that we should split this code into two separate codes. The external person who doesn't have a paid license doesn't have the option to create codes or to tag things with codes, but they are given the option to leave comments. So this can be a way for them to look over, review things, leave their suggestions without needing their own paid account. These comments are a free feature. They will need to create a webQDA account, but they can use a free version. Now, if we would like to add someone else who does have a paid account, of course, they can also join in. We can add them. It's as easy as clicking on invite, putting in their email address, and choosing if they'll be a guest, which can be a free account and can only leave comments, or a collaborator, which can make changes and basically do everything that we've just seen, from uploading new sources to tagging sources with new socio-demographic information or with new category tags. All of that, we can invite other people in here. And we can choose who is the manager, the lead of this project. By default, the person who creates the project is the manager. That's where I am, but we can invite more and more people. And there's no real limit on how many people could be involved in this project. So if we want to work on a big international project where we're going to try to analyze a whole lot of data, especially from several different countries, no problem. We can add all of our members in here and give each of them the role of contributor, and we can all work together. And we can even be working, tagging the same document at the same time. Imagine if we had 100 responses here in this Google form. It would be a long document here, right? Well, it shows us how many people are online. We could all be in here working on different parts. You say, yeah, you start at the top, I'll start at the bottom, and we'll meet in the middle. Yeah, and we can both be working at the same time. These collaborative features are a highlight of webQDA. Since it's all web platform based anyways, it's very easy to add in these collaborative features. We're all working from the same internet, so we can work together at the same time. All we need to do is invite more people into our account with a paid subscription or with a free account so they can leave us some comments. So I hope that this has been useful. I hope this has given you a taste of what webQDA can do. Now we want to leave a little bit of time here at the end for some questions and for some extra bonuses that the team here at webQDA has in mind for you. So we're going to leave a little bit of time here at the end for some questions, and with the moderation here of Sonia from webQDA, we're going to start wrapping up this presentation.